this out for the first time, the goal of this broadcast is support and serve the needs of nurse educators in the trenches and empower them with practical strategies to better prepare students for practice and licensure. And if you stumbled upon this live stream and you're wondering who I am, my name is Keith, and I'm the CEO of APRN and have been building educational support tools for nurse educators since 2012 through the website APRN. And based on the needs of nurse educators who are in the trenches of practice, what are they needing? It's my passion to develop those resources. And the essence of my tools are unfolding case studies that capture the essence of clinical reasoning that leads to the correct clinical judgment and captures the essence of Chris Tanner's framework of model of clinical judgment that will also be the basis for next-gen NCLEX. And I also want to let you know I've still got the joy as I just successfully completed my Ph.D. program just less than a week ago with my final defense, as well as my final assignments over the weekend, and excited to kind of just get that off of my platter and kind of have some margin to really kind of engage in the next steps that I can utilize through APRN to serve your needs. And so I wanted to let you know that in a couple of weeks, just a heads up, I'm going to be talking about my dissertation study that's very relevant to every nurse educator on the topic of utilizing unfolding case studies to develop critical thinking. I'm going to share some findings from my literature review and just really make it real so you can really kind of take what's current with the knowledge that I was able to generate from the study and how it can impact you in the trenches and strengthen your teaching in nursing education. And so, what I wanted to kind of highlight is that last week I talked with Dr. Marianne Biangoni about student resilience and grit. And that was a very powerful and very practical discussion. And if you missed that, I want you to know that you can go back and you can see that on APRN, Think Like a Nurse Facebook page under videos on the far left-hand column. And you can access that presentation. But Dr. Biangoni is going to be talking about improving retention and student success. And we'll go deeper at the conference that APRN is sponsoring a week from today. Next Thursday from 9 a.m. to 1:45 p.m. Central, so don't miss it. And so I just want you to know that if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out by asking any questions in this chat and what that looks like. Now, I have a real simple question for you that I wonder if some of you have also wondered and pondered. How can you improve the engagement of your students? And what do you need to do differently to strengthen online teaching as well as in the traditional setting? You know, as I talk to educators around the country and just did a full day conference today for the Missouri League for Nursing, one of the greatest challenges that educators continue to face is engaging our students. You know, how do we engage them with meaningful active learning? And really, how can we utilize the science of learning? How our brains were wired and created to learn to strengthen student learning and engagement, whatever the setting may be. And I'm excited to share and have with me tonight Dr. Sally Kennedy, who's an experienced educator who has an answer to this important question. And I want to let you know that Dr. Kennedy is one of the gems that I met on my PhD doctoral journey as a textbook author. Dr. Biangoni from last week's session was a student colleague who's got so much to offer and excited to have her go deeper on her content. But Dr. Kennedy is the author of this textbook, Designing and Teaching Online Courses in Nursing. And this was one of my favorite courses as well as my favorite textbook, because what Dr. Kennedy does well is that she unpackages not only how to strengthen online teaching, and for those of you that are being forced out of your comfort zone, you have a resource in this textbook. But what Dr. Kennedy does very well is that she unpackages the science of learning, the different learning theories, as well as the transformational paradigm shifts that Dr. Benner advocated for in educating nurses, a call for radical transformation, because 10 years later, we still need that change. And Dr. Kennedy, I kind of used email and LinkedIn to connect with her and immediately recognized that we share a similar passion and are really kindred spirits to strengthen and transform nursing education. And so I'm excited to have Dr. Sally Kennedy here, but there's only one little problem. She's in the beauty of Colorado in the mountains, and she has a very tenuous internet connection. And so I just saw that she just dropped out, but we've got a great audio connection once we get her back on. And so if you can hang on for just about, I hope no less than 30 seconds, we'll have Dr. Kennedy with us, and she's going to share some practical strategies from her textbook and kind of her journey in nursing education so we can kind of learn and grow. I think that we all have stories in nursing education. We all, in essence, have a story. We all have a journey. Sometimes that journey has taken us in unexpected places. And so I'm excited to have Dr. Kennedy share her story. And we're going to put her on right now, and we'll get her on. Let me just kind of make sure that we've got her connection. Dr. Kennedy, are you with us?
I am with you.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Kennedy, it is truly a pleasure to have you here on our Facebook Live and just the chance to share your journey and your story. And, you know, a lot of undergraduate nurse educators aren't familiar with your body of work and some of the articles you've written, as well as just the book. But before we get started, you know, from what I understand, you know, your path in nursing began as a nurse practitioner. And that was kind of your passion for the first half of your career. Then you transitioned to nursing education and online instructional design. And we'd just like to kind of know your story with just kind of this unique journey of going from an NP to teaching and then becoming an online instructional expert and then writing your book. So what did that look like for you, just in a nutshell? And you know what? We lost, I'll kind of get around her picture here. We got a tenuous connection, but we're going to do our best to get there. And Dr. Kennedy, all right.
I'm back. For
Wonderful. Well, let's hope and pray. I'm going to pray. I'll live on a prayer here, and let's keep our connection. And so did you get my first question, Dr. Kennedy?
I think so. You're asking about my journey?
Yes, as a nurse practitioner, and then kind of just with online instruction and just what that looked like for you. It's kind of a unique path, and I just like our audience to get a sense of what that looked like and what that was for you.
It's probably more unique than you realize, but as a diploma graduate, I was suddenly a nurse practitioner. I had an opportunity to go through a year certification program at Northwestern University, and I took that opportunity, not really knowing what a nurse practitioner was, but it has served me well. And I knew I would be an educator at the end of my career. I didn't know when the end of my career would come, and 50 years later, I'm still there. But basically, I precepted in my clinical practice in internal medicine some OBGYN nurse practitioner students from the University of Phoenix. Women's health and women's psychological health was really my passion at that point in my career. And soon after I started precepting students, they asked me to teach in the program, which was a classroom-based program. And here were 9 students, and I was behind the lectern, and it was very awkward. So I soon realized that lecturing to these students was just not the way to go. They were all OBGYN nurses. They had much more experience in the field than I had, but I was going to take them to the next level to become nurse practitioners. So for some reason, I started using case studies, and actually you're unfolding case studies that I know you're an expert in, but I was just winging it. I mean, I had no textbook knowledge of what this entailed, but I knew what clinical practice was like and the process of getting information out of patients and learning their history and then doing an exam that would validate or refute my hypotheses about what was going on. So I mimicked that in case studies and did unfolding case studies with them. And they really enjoyed the case studies. And I actually did their final exam as an unfolding case study, which was quite an interesting process. I developed 3 or 4 fairly intellectually equivalent cases and put them all on different colored papers so I could keep things straight. And students would, I'd give them part one, which was just a very brief history, chief complaint, vital signs, and ask them what questions they had, what information they needed to gather based on the hypotheses that were in their head about what could possibly be going on. Amenorrhea was one of them, and dysfunctional uterine bleeding was the other one, which can go all different directions, and you have to think about those different directions. And as you gather information, you learn to focus your directions. And then students came up with their certain color paper, and I handed them the same color paper for part two, and it went on. And it took about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get them through this final exam. But they really appreciated the engagement and the task, and I had a great time learning it. So believe me, I was hooked then on teaching methods. And when I decided to do my doctorate, I had to find some way to study teaching methods. And instructional designers are the teaching methods experts. So that's the course I took and did a doctorate in education. And along the way, I wanted to learn more about case studies. So I took the problem-based learning tutor course at the medical school at Southern Illinois University, which is where Dr. Barrows was, who was the physician who brought problem-based learning to this country. I'm so sorry about this noise. And I learned to facilitate these, the problem-based learning cases, and developed the method to go online. And my last job was actually as an instructional designer, taking this problem-based learning online, which Howard Barrows himself said could never be done. So that's how I got involved with online education. I am convinced that online education is not only equivalent to what is learned in the classroom, but it offers great opportunities for students who are shy or who don't like to participate in class because they have to participate online. And it really gives the educator a sense of what they know, what they don't know, and how I can support their education.
You know, and I'm curious, Doctor. Oops, I got some backup there. But what I'd like to just kind of clarify with.
Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dr. Kennedy? Oh, we lost that connection again. Well, we'll hold on here for just a moment. It's kind of difficult when you've got someone in Colorado, and I think with a tenuous connection, but we'll do our best to get back on board here. I see her coming on, and
I'm so sorry about this, people.
Oh, Dr. Kennedy, we got this. We got this. I'm glad you're back. You know, one of my follow-up questions that's really important is that you have a lot of nurse educators who are being thrust into online instruction, kind of kicking and screaming, and not really prepared for the essence, doing their classrooms online and even clinical teaching online. What I'd like to know are just what are some big picture principles that you can provide for us that would give any educator kind of just some broad strokes that's really would help them be more effective, and that engagement. You know, when I talk to educators, the engagement is where they struggle in the online setting, and getting their students to really engage and really participate. What could you share with us that could help strengthen teaching in general with this in the online setting?
Well, first of all, I hope the educators will reserve their judgment about what online teaching is all about if they're using Zoom. From my perspective, synchronous online teaching is distance education. It is not online education. And I think we need to make a strong between or among really the different types of teaching online, because right now our research is not having any meaning. I have a puppy. That's my puppy. Online teaching with Zoom is a synchronous activity, and it basically mimics what goes on in the classroom. And so that's really not online education. And I've never used a synchronous method of teaching. I think it has its benefits to some degree, but it's really not an engaging environment in terms of requiring that all students participate. You can use case studies, certainly, which I think is the only way we're going to engage students. We really have to get their attention and keep it. And I can't tell you from my years of experience with online education and tossing a case study out to students and telling them that, okay, now you get an opportunity to pretend you're a nurse practitioner. We want you to do what you need to do to be a nurse practitioner. And they just jump in and they love it.
Well, we lost her again. Let's just kind of wait just a moment because I want Dr. Kennedy to build on that. I think what really what I really valued about that last insight is that as educators, we need to recognize that just because we're teaching online and doing asynchronous isn't really utilizing the online setting to its maximum abilities. And I think that that's a really, if we're primarily doing a synchronous kind of classroom discussion, like she said, where we're just kind of putting it online, if we really want to understand how we can strengthen online instruction, we need to go deeper than that. Now, for us right now, we're kind of in essence, just wanting to get that replacement activity out there. But what Dr. Kennedy has to share, and I hope we're able to tease this out in this Facebook Live and YouTube Live, is to kind of dig deeper, because I know that all of us as educators, we want to strengthen and engage our students and to get them to interact and engage. And so, recognizing, there are strategies and principles that we can utilize to do that more effectively. And so, I think that's an important takeaway, and to make that distinction. I know that some of us are just kind of in survival mode. We just kind of want to just kind of basically do what's needed. And there's some value to that in principle. And we need to start there because we need to provide the instruction. But the question is, how can we provide that instruction and then basically take it to the next notch? Like I've shared before, I believe that this is an opportunity for nurse educators to transform the way that they teach. And now that we have Dr. Kennedy back, Dr. Kennedy, could you please build on what you made? You made a very powerful statement about just kind of in principle that synchronous online instruction really isn't online teaching. The question I have is that kind of give us a sense of just kind of how can educators who are teaching kind of for survival mode online to just get the synchronous content in the classroom and whatever that looks like. But if we're going asynchronous, for example, with our classroom instruction or clinical, what are some practical ways that we can just easily, without being an expert, but yet learn from your background, what can we do differently as educators to strengthen our online, to maximize the online setting for all that it's worth?
I think you have to put students into small groups, discussion groups, and you can certainly do that with Zoom, I understand, and give them a problem. Yes, give them a case to solve, and I would give different cases to each group. I'm assuming they can't talk to each other outside their group, but you want this group to concentrate on a case. And I'm not sure where you lost me, but the case could be focused on physical assessment. It could be focused on clinical content, pathophysiology, pharmacology, however you want to focus it, but you have to be very clear on your outcomes. What is it that you want the students to get out of this discussion, and how does it relate to your course objectives? And it's not easy to do, believe me. The instructors were thrown into this no classroom activity, and it has to be done gradually. But there's a kind of a myth in nursing education that the only way students are going to learn anything is by an educator mentioning it. And thus the lecture has taken hold, and that's what's been used for, well, since I was in school 50 years ago, probably even before that. But cases are the best way to go, whether you do them unfolding as you do, Keith, and we'll learn more about that next week in the seminar, or if you do just a short case where students can work through it in 15 minutes or so in their little small groups, come together and then talk about, what they discovered, what the path is, what they learned, and that sort of thing. Because hopefully when students are on Zoom, they still have access to the internet and their resources. Yep. They can look things up and investigate things. So my guess is that these case studies will have to be fairly simple to begin with, so until the educators get used to facilitating them and not answering direct questions and directly teaching, but use probing questions. Well, what does that mean? Can you tell me more about that? Is anybody else in the room, bring them back as a group, have any comments on this area? But it has to be a fact-finding, detective, figure-it-out kind of case where students really have to dig, and it's not something straightforward.
Yeah. No, excellent. And, as I look at your textbook, Dr. Kennedy, you wrote this book in 2017 when it was published, Designing and Teaching Online Courses in Nursing. What led you to write this textbook? What was kind of your mission statement? And what would undergraduate educators, what would they get out of this book as far as some of the essential themes from your perspective as the author? I'd love your insights on that, please.
Well, what led me to write the book was working as an instructional designer in a college of nursing in a major academic medical center in the Southeast. And faculty have no time to attend face-to-face educational sessions. And I put together an online learning educational session, and it had like 7 or 8 modules in it for teaching online and talking about the science of learning and starting in the beginning and building it forward. And everything in my book just about is applicable to teaching face-to-face. Online teaching is my expertise. Problem-based learning is my love. And that's why I decided to focus it on that. But really, it applies to any type of educator in any setting. You asked me something else too, but that's how I came to write it basically, is because I started it in 2015. In the previous 2 years, I had been charged with evaluating all of the courses in the College of Nursing, our accelerated BSN, MSN, FNP, and the Ph.D. programs. And the book had been out for 5 years, and it was very clear to me that it wasn't being implemented, either online or in the classroom. And so what my goal was really to write a book for faculty that taught them how to implement the changes in nursing education that the Carnegie report found is necessary to really bring nurses into the learning space that they needed to be in. Their findings were not new for people who had been in education for years. It's old stuff. We read about Wenger and LeVay, and we knew about situated cognition, but nobody knew how to implement it. And so that was the goal of the book, is really to give faculty a pathway to be able to put it together.
Yeah, and that's really where I've sensed, Dr. Kennedy, just kind of the kindred spirit that we both share, because that's been my passion since I read Dr. Benner's work in educating nurses. And I do believe I have it right here. So if you, as an educator, this is, again, a must-read textbook, Educating Nurses, a call for radical transformation, because this really, one of, my passions, as well as Dr. Kennedy's in her book on online learning, is operationalizing it. How do you make this practical and implement that? And so really, that's one of the strengths that Dr. Kennedy just does that from a different perspective, from her lens of practice from the online world, but yet the content is very relevant for any undergraduate nurse educator. Want to tie in, Dr. Kennedy, you're going to be presenting 2 topics at the Prepare for Practice 2020 virtual conference coming just next week, August 13th. And you're going to be doing a topic on operationalizing the science of learning to support teaching and learning. And I'd like to know, what will educators take away from that session? It's a great topic. What's kind of the essence of that? What's that going to look like?
Well, my hope is that they will take what I present on the science of learning. Some things they've heard before, but some things are new. cognitive science literature is very difficult to understand. At least I struggled with it until I found a book called Minds Online that really laid it out. It was written by a psychologist. And what I hope that the takeaway will be is that the educators will listen to what we know about learning and compare the teaching opportunities from that science with their own practice and look at how they could improve their practice to improve the outcome of students being successful in the education programs, being resilient and staying with it, having persistence, and doing well on the NCLEX.
Okay. Is there any specific learning science theory that you really, if there's multiple theories, do you really, Dr. Benner, I think, really gravitates towards situated cognition, which is, again, just providing context to the content to make it scaffold, to hook it, and to retain it. Is there anything that you would add to that as it relates to scaffolding the science of learning? And unfortunately, we just, here she's back. I was hoping I wouldn't lose her for good.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
no worries. We got you back.
Situated cognition, I think, is more a model or a strategy. It's a theory to some degree, but I'm going to go into the hard science, the cognitive science, and we'll talk about the value of recurrent testing, interleaving, and gosh, I hadn't prepared myself for this particular question, but there are some, like most schools give them, or courses have a midterm and a final. Well, that's fine, but you can't hear me.
No, I still got you. You're still online. Oh, the joy of the internet and what that looks like. The second session that Dr. Kennedy is going to be doing, I love the title. It's called How to Create and Facilitate Case Studies That Engage, the Smorgasbord Method with Socratic Seasoning. And one of the things that educators can learn a lot from is a Greek philosopher named Socrates, because he had a method and a way of teaching called Socratic questioning. And Socratic questioning is something that educators can use in the context of a case study. And so if I understand Dr. Kennedy's vibe with this, she's going to be talking about and utilizing case studies and really more those shorter cases. One of the things that I do, I think that my strength is that my case studies tend to be unfolding and tend to be longer in length. And so they're suited for that 30-minute discussion. You can certainly take 15-minute bites and to use them in a short topic. But they tend to be better suited for the different levels of a little bit longer. And they don't have that Socratic emphasis of inquiry. I really kind of lean on Chris Tanner's framework of clinical judgment in her 4 reasoning steps of noticing, interpreting, responding, reflecting. And so, Dr. Kennedy, when you look at your second session topic, I know I can see you on my screen. Can you give us some feedback and some guidance as far as what are you going to be sharing with that second session?
Well, when I started developing case studies and using them in the classroom as well as online, I didn't realize I was doing problem-based learning. And these cases often went for 2 weeks, so they weren't short cases. They were fairly lengthy, but they weren't particularly unfolding. Other than that, we gave the students pieces of information and asked questions along the way to keep them focused on the task at hand. So in my reading, and actually a doctorate degree, I ran into Hung's 3C3R method, which is a way of creating content and of the cases that support reasoning and reflection. And we'll go through those as a method to create a case study. It's kind of like going to a smorgasbord or a Chinese restaurant where you say, okay, I'm going to have a salad and I'm going to pick a vegetable and maybe a little bit of the main course, and then I'll get 3 desserts. And it's a smorgasbord where you pick from different areas to include it in your meal. And the Socratic questioning is really facilitation. I'm going to talk about what it is and what it is not, because some people, I've seen educators use it as a gotcha kind of thing, or guess what I'm thinking, and that's not what the Socratic method is all about.
It's really a method of inquiry, and kind of, if you're even to define Socratic questioning, what would be your best definition of that, Dr. Kennedy? When you look at just that, using that strategy, what's the essence of that, and how would you operationalize that as simply as possible?
Well, they're probing questions that gets the student to go deeper and deeper into their knowledge base until they get to I don't know. And when they get to I don't know, that's their learning opportunity. Go look it up, find out, bring it back to us. But it's done in a caring and supportive way.
Absolutely. Excellent. And, just in closing, what would be one pearl that you could share that would strengthen and transform nursing education, so students are graduating better prepared for practice and licensure? You're immersed with Dr. Benner's work from the Carnegie Foundation and those of her co-authors. As you look at just nursing education from your vantage point, what would that look like to you? What would you like to see educators do differently that can strengthen and bring that transformation that's desperately needed?
I think the most important thing is bringing didactic education and the clinical experience together and integrating them from the beginning and not separating them. I remember being in my undergraduate biochemistry class in nursing school and sitting there listening to the lecture and wondering why I had to learn this stuff. And I think it's important that we let students know that up front. This is what we're going to study, and this is what our goal is for you, and you're going to use this information in your clinical practice, so pay attention kind of thing. But I think that's one of the shifts that the Carnegie report realized. And again, this is situated cognition, goes back to the early 90s, and it's just a matter of learning how to implement it that's been lacking for nurse educators.
Oh, that's excellent. And thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Kennedy. I'm just going to kind of go live here and just kind of close it out here and we'll bring you back here for some questions. And so I want you to be thinking about some questions that you may have for Dr. Kennedy. But, as we look ahead, next Thursday, Keith RN is sponsoring again, Prepare for Practice 2020. The subtitle is Successful Strategies to Develop Clinical Judgment for Practice and Licensure. It's going to be just a half-day conference, so it's just going to be 4 hours with breaks, 4 CEUs from 9 to 1:45, really providing practical strategies to develop that clinical judgment that our students require and utilizing different strategies. I'll be sharing on unfolding case studies and some practical ways to operationalize those and some new ways based on what I've learned from my dissertation, my Ph.D. studies. And Dr. Kennedy will be sharing those sessions that we've mentioned. And I've got Dr. Biangoni will be sharing on student resilience and grit. Really, how can we strengthen and improve student success? So all of these are really relevant and practical topics. And if you're watching tonight, you can save 10% by using the coupon code Facebook. And I'll be sharing with you just that link. And I think, if you just really actually just go to, I'll just pop it on the screen there, just keithrn.com and use the coupon code Facebook. I also wanted to let you know that as we look ahead to 2 weeks from today, I'm going to take a week off next week. We're going to have the conference on Thursday morning. The following Thursday, I'm going to be sharing the essence of my dissertation study on the impact of unfolding case studies on the development of critical thinking. And so I'm going to make it really practical. This will not be a dissertation defense. I promise you that. I've just one and done. I'm good. But the bottom line is I'm just going to make it really practical and sharing some strategies. So be sure to join me in a couple of weeks on the next Facebook Live, 2 weeks from today. So please put that on your calendar. And in closing, from what Dr. Kennedy shared tonight, what was your big takeaway? Or what questions do you have regarding the science of learning or developing case studies with that Socratic inquiry type of questions? I'm going to be looking at the chat here, and I'd love to get your feedback. And so I'm just kind of looking at some of the questions here, and I'm going to pull in back Dr. Kennedy, and we're going to finish strong, and we're going to keep our connection. How does that sound? and we'll do our best. And so anyways, I'm just going to go here and just I got some intermittent questions here, but I'm looking here. Let's see here. Okay. I see some chatter. If you have a question for Dr. Kennedy, looking at the science of learning and active and case-based learning, again, she does it a little differently than I do, with some of that shorter emphasis in the Socratic kind of seasoning, which I think will be very powerful and practical. But let me know what questions you have, and I'll kind of wait here for just a moment and just kind of look in. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything here and what this looks like. And so make sure, here we go. Somebody asked what seminar is next week. And Pauline, that's just simply the conference that we're going to have that you can register for. Again, if you just go to keithrn.com, and you can see the page there, and you'll see the link on the top right, and you can put that all together. So Tanya has a question. I'm not quite sure, Tanya, if you could clarify this just a little bit, but you say, what is best distant? What is best, distant or virtual? And so, Dr. Kennedy, I'm not the online expert here, but how do you split the hairs of virtual learning or distant learning? Are those synonyms, or are there distinct differences?
No, I think they're really synonyms. I think there's a lot of language out there that really needs to be defined. In fact, that's a paper I've been meaning to write and get published, that we really needed to make some decisions here. But virtual and distance just means you're not in the classroom, you're not face-to-face. So it could be somebody across the street online as one of your students. But virtual just means it's online. But there are so many other ways that distance education is taught. Some students gather in a classroom, and their faculty member is miles away, and they're listening to a chat on video and a lecture. So there's just a multitude of ways to learn at a distance, and we just need to define them.
Okay. So in essence, they are synonym. And so she says this, and I love this question. This is from Deb, saying, what was the name of the method you referred for building case studies? It was something 3-3. And so would you like to just go a little deeper on that? And what is that acronym, and what does it mean? And so kind of build upon that so we can kind of get a sense as far as what are you going to be sharing with the case studies in that Socratic seasoning, because that's a part of that strategy. So go ahead.
Well, I'd kind of rather have them join us to get the full picture of it next week. But 3 C's, one of the C's is content, another one is connection, the 3 R's, one of them is reflection. But I'd rather not go into the whole thing right now, but it's a means of creating a case study, of building a case study so that you don't forget anything. And then it's also a means of keeping track of what content you put in a case so you don't repeat the same thing over and over. For example, when I develop cases, I talked about foreground information and background information. Foreground information, what I wanted the students to discover from the case and learn. Background information was the static, the messy part of it, where the patient was a smoker and they had diabetes and hypertension, and what I really wanted them to focus on was their depression. So they had to extract the salient information and put it aside the other problems that were still important, but not to be focused on. So the 3C3R method is a method of creating case studies that is
excellent. And that ties in with your objectives too, does it not? And tying in your objectives to the content. So you're kind of aligning your case studies and really creating them to be completely in alignment with your course objectives. Do I have that correct?
Right. You always have to understand your outcomes before you can really do anything in nursing education. That is like the top priority. And whether they're outcomes of a case study, outcomes of your course, I know most educators are handed the course objectives. They have no say in what level they're written at or anything. But they do have a way that they can teach students and assess them that will stick to the objectives, but you can educate them a much broader sense with these.
Yeah. And, I have a question here. Some of our educators, I think she's asking to define the terms, but she would like to know, Tanya is asking, asynchronous versus synchronous. We throw those terms around as online educators, but could you just simply define those terms and kind of unpackage it just a little bit, Dr. Kennedy?
Sure. Synchronous is in real time. That's what Zoom is. You are talking to the students and they're sitting in their offices and at home, and they're in real time. Asynchronous education is anywhere, anytime. You can't sleep at night. You get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can log on to your learning management system and work on the discussion question for the day. Your colleagues may or may not be there, but it doesn't matter. You can post your main post, and if somebody's there that wants to chat and contribute to your discussion, then you have someone to share with.
And if I understand you correctly, you're an advocate for asynchronous online learning because you can ask those, if you're asking the right questions that promote that deeper reflection and that Socratic kind of inquiry, you can develop some very rich reflective learning through the right questions in an asynchronous type of question and a strategy. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely correct. And it is a very robust experience, and students can't hide. They have to participate, and they're anonymous, and so if they say something that maybe isn't the best, brightest thing, they don't have to, people don't have to look at their red face. I mean, it's just so soothing to people who don't normally participate in class. They have an opportunity to take time and put their discussion answers together. They don't have to do it quickly, and it's the best environment for the reflective learner.
Yeah, and that's really where the online can shine. That's where we can really even strengthen and transform, online instruction within nursing education by asking the deeper questions, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you have to make them messy, which is a problem-based learning term. You don't want them to be neat and clean. You want them to be messy like real life is in nursing.
Absolutely. And that's really where the realism comes in. It's like this nursing practice is messy. So let's bring that messiness into our online teaching. And again, provide those deeper reflective questions where they don't have to get that answer right now, but they need to formulate it and give them time to develop that. Great feedback, and thank you for sharing. Got some great questions here, Dr. Kennedy. One says this, I'll kind of pop on the screen here, says, I know this may be a loaded question, but what is the best way to get started in online instruction? So, if you're teaching in a traditional study, maybe you want to be, I think I can infer from Susan, and you can clarify, Susan, it's like if you want to be more of an online instructor versus in a traditional setting, how do you empower yourself to successfully teach and to really engage students online and to transition to that different setting within education? Dr. Kennedy, what would your thoughts be?
Well, my bias would be read my book.
Okay.
There are several chapters. There are several chapters online on the Google Books. You can get a sort of a sense of the way I write and the focus of the book. The chapter on objectives is up there, which is based on the transformation that Benner wants to see. We have to write our objectives to align with that. So, but really, there are very few resources out there. Some schools of nursing and universities have online IT departments that provide instruction on how to teach online. Mm-hmm. And in that way, you learn their model and how they want it done. My book talks about how to do it to transform nursing education. That is my whole premise, to give faculty a way to operationalize what Benner and her colleagues have been saying.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Got another question, and I'll pop it on the screen here where you can actually see it in part. Any suggestions on building student confidence with online learning? A lot of our students during the start of COVID felt they weren't getting their money's worth by not being able to attend traditional clinical. What were your thoughts on that?
Clinical's tough, teaching online, but something to keep in mind is there's a cognitive aspect to clinical, and there's a psychomotor and reasoning aspect to clinical. So if you can create that with what you call the simulation, low fidelity simulation with case studies, you can.
Oh, we lost her. I know she'll be back here. We'll give her just less than 30 seconds. And we're kind of winding down, but thank you for sticking with us. I apologize for these challenges. This is the kind of, I think for those of you who have been teaching with Zoom, you've certainly, I'm sure, had your technical challenges as well and can certainly relate. So bear with this Facebook Live, and we'll get Dr. Kennedy to pop in here shortly. And you've got a couple more questions. You've got some great questions I'd love to get her feedback on because they're very important. And I think, again, online instruction, I want us as educators to see it as an opportunity and not something that we just want to kind of just limp through and just do it. It's an opportunity for transformation. And that's really what I value about Dr. Kennedy's insights, is that she ties in the transformational paradigms that are still needed in nursing education and to tie that into online instruction. That's the value of Dr. Kennedy's book. And so I've got her back with me here. We'll hopefully wrap this up shortly, Dr. Kennedy. I've got a couple more questions here, and we'll kind of put this together. Did you want to kind of, I don't get a chance to really finish that last question about the clinical learning and how can we really strengthen student confidence in the online setting where they feel that they're getting a valuable, learning experience? What can we do to strengthen the clinical learning? Could Socratic questioning and some reflective questions related to cases be a strategy that could be effective? And what would that look like?
Yeah, that is an effective way. But to address her initial question about confidence, I think it's the way faculty present this, that we are all learning in together. We're into this mess together. We're going to do the best we can. We have your best interest at heart, and we want to continue your learning uninterrupted as if we were face-to-face in the classroom. And we will develop relationships online. It's amazing how it happens. But I would think the key would be to put the students into small groups and let them get to know each other, in their small groups and begin to work as a community of inquiry. And I think that will build their confidence. In front of a class of however many people, 65 we had in our class, it would be daunting. And then introduce the topic of, start with a simple case study and then, build on it. But don't hit them with a really complex case right off the bat.
Yeah. No, totally agree. And thank you for sharing. Just kind of looking at this, Misty has a statement saying, I had not heard about the richness of asynchronous with pre-licensure students, and love that idea. And so I think that for many educators, Dr. Kennedy, they're used to kind of just trying to replicate the classroom. And what you're saying, if I understand you right, is that don't do that. It's an opportunity to transform your classroom, and just would be curious if you kind of have some thoughts to build on that.
Well, a lot of the universities.
Oh no, we lost her one last time. We'll give her one more chance to get on, so hang in there, and we'll get this last question answered. But I love the chat here. This really encourages me. I really want to encourage all of you. I know that some of you may be shy, but it's really a blessing when you're a presenter and all you've got is a screen in front of you with the camera. You don't know if anybody's really watching or engaging, and you can't see the eyes. But when you see the chat, you know what? You know that there's people out there, they're engaging with you. So thank you so much for just for hanging out with both of us tonight. And we'll get Dr. Kennedy back on. She's here, and we'll get this going one more time. So Dr. Kennedy, you're on once again. We'll wrap this up here shortly before we lose you again.
Yeah, not sure where you lost me, but if you can, you can do the asynchronous discussion to some degree in Zoom if they're put in small groups and they work things out on their own. But if you can get a hold of a learning management system and learn how to, or have them set up discussion boards for you and put the students in groups of 3 to 5, and give them a case study. You can set up the learning management system so they can't see their initial post until other students have posted. So they'll go online and it'll look like nobody else is online, and they'll post, and then once they've posted, up will come the conversation. So that is ideal if you have that available at your university.
Yes, and I know that when I went to William and Mary University, they had that in Canvas, which was their LMS. They call it the hidden feature, where you cannot see anybody's post until you post first, and then you see the conversation, which I agree is a very powerful and practical strategy. We'll have one more closing question. Do you recommend doing 2 to 3 case studies in lecture online? I'm not quite sure what Chandrika is referring to, but I'm thinking how would you kind of break up a case study, Dr. Kennedy, for it to be effective?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'll pop this on the screen here. This is kind of what she wrote. Do you recommend doing 2 to 3 case studies in lecture online? And if you have some thoughts on that question, or just kind of, is there a length of, when you look at case studies, using them online to maximize, is there some best practices, just in principle, that can guide some thoughts?
Well, again, I come back to knowing what your outcomes are. And a case study, like I said, the nurse practitioner case studies go on for 2 weeks on one particular topic, one case. And we give students in each discussion board a different case that the topic is related somehow. And then we have them kind of review the posts of all the different discussion boards. But the thing that throws me in that question is the word lecture, because you can certainly do a short lecture and then throw up a case study and get students to apply what they've just learned. That's certainly a way to see if they're paying attention and keep them engaged. It's better done with clickers in the classroom, and I understand iPhones can be set up to be clickers so that you can do the same sort of thing online. I've not looked into that at all, but I know it's possible. So I'm not sure how she would integrate the lecture with the case studies, what she was thinking.
Okay. Yeah, and if she has able to respond, but she can please put a chat in there, Chandrika, to clarify. But otherwise, our last question is, groups of 5 sounds great. I'll put it on the screen here, Dr. Kennedy, because groups of 5 sounds great. Do you change groups for each class, or do you keep them steady or consistent throughout the semester?
In my experience in higher education, the same faculty member doesn't teach the same course time after time. So you would have no way of communicating that, who the groups were.
Oops. Oh, we lost her one last time. And so let's see if we can get her back here. And if not, we will. Here she comes. That was a quick back. There we go, Dr. Kennedy. We got you back.
Okay. I think it's good for students to get to know other people. The beauty of asynchronous discussions is that students post their own thoughts. They have to do their own research because they can't read what everybody else wrote and then, put it up as their thought. And they take other people's perspectives and they learn from them. So sort of mixing students up in different groups gives students different perspectives to hear on different topics. So from my perspective, we always mixed up the student groups unless we knew of some interaction that was not good between a couple of students, then we would try to keep them apart. But otherwise, it was just roll of the dice, and put the students in discussion groups.
Got it. And, Chandrika just clarified her question, or that aspect, and it's basically, yes, lecture, then case study. And I'm assuming that that's going to be a concise lecture, Chandrika. Again, I have a transform lecture template that keeps it concise, relevant, less than 20 minutes. Paula's got a couple thoughts there that she shared in the chat about just using that as a guideline. I did a Facebook Live on that several weeks ago, so please take a look at that if you have further questions. But other than that, Dr. Kennedy, that was our final question, and I want to thank you so much for persevering with us during this Facebook Live. We got it done, And I want to thank you for just sharing your time with us tonight. And we'll look forward to learning more about your topics on the science of learning and Socratic seasoning with case studies, and putting that into our strengthening our online teaching as we look ahead to fall, as we're unfortunately being forced, ready or not, to transition to that strategy, into that setting. So any closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to share before you leave tonight?
I just want to thank everybody for hanging there in here with me, and for giving me the opportunity, Keith, to talk about myself.
Yes, you've got a great book, Dr. Kennedy, that can really serve the needs and strengthen nursing education. I want to thank all of you who stuck with us to the end in this Facebook Live chat. You guys have a great night, and I hope to see many of you next week. And again, if you have, I'll just kind of put that on the screen again. Just go to keithrn.com. And if you want to just learn more about the conference, see what you think, see about the different sessions, digest it. But you got the 10% coupon can use up until the day of the conference. And so use that coupon Facebook. And until next time, I'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on the next Facebook Live, where I share my study in unfolding case studies to develop critical thinking. Have a great week. Blessings to you all. Take care.